I stayed by the window, watching the car back out of the drive, turn to the right, and then disappear along the street. I wondered at my own apathy. A decade of my existence had just rolled away. Shouldn't I have felt something? Wasn't there supposed to be more than an indifferent shrug? Well, might as well deal with that dripping faucet, I mused, heading towards the kitchen. My mind replayed the last half hour as I moved. Coming home from work, I found my wife, Peggy, at the kitchen table, a glass of wine untouched before her. Her early arrival and the unstarted dinner were immediate signs of trouble, compounded by her unusual indulgence in wine. She wasted no time, urging me to sit as she had something crucial to say. After grabbing a beer, I sat down across from her, and she started. Rob, for 6 months, things have been off between us. I can't quite place the blame, it could be me or you, but the problem is there. I've tried talking about it, but you dismiss it as a temporary setback. I think we need some time apart. This isn't about divorce, just some space to reflect on what's causing our drift. This time could also offer you a new perspective. Look, Peg, it's not all that bad. Every couple goes through tough times. We won't solve anything by separating and stopping our communication. But communication isn't our only problem. Rob, you think we're just missing intimacy. That's a surface-level fix. There's deeper trouble. I've lost the desire for your closeness, your touch, and I don't understand why. My love for you is unchanged. I hold you dear as on the day we married. Yet something's wrong, and I'm at a loss. I need this space, Rob. Alone time to figure it out. So, you're okay with throwing away 10 years I challenged? It's not about discarding our time together, Rob. We just need a break. My things are already in my car. I'll be with my sister until I find my own place. I'll call every week to keep in touch. She got up, said she needed to go, and assured she'd arrive at her destination by 7. She left without a farewell kiss, leaving me to grasp the seriousness of our plight. News of Peggy's and my split quickly spread among our friends, who offered words of comfort and tried to boost my morale. Peggy kept her promise, calling weekly to check on me. I'd tell her I was managing and probe about her return, only to be told, not yet. 6 weeks after she left, rumors started to fly about her seeing someone else. I chose denial, holding on to the hope that her need for solitude was genuine, and clinging to the possibility of her return. The rumors persisted, prompting me to consider investigating for myself. I wanted to find out where Peggy was to put the rumors to rest. Yet no one seemed to know, or if they did, they weren't saying, and I began to suspect there was more to the story. Over dinner with my friend Tom and his wife Tanya, I expressed my concerns and mulled over hiring a detective to find Peggy to confirm or quell the rumors. I caught a significant look pass between Tom and Tanya, followed by her subtle nod. "Don't waste your money," Tom suggested. "The rumors are true. Many people familiar with you are conscious of the current situation, but their affection for you prevents them from speaking up. What are you saying? That Peggy has left you for a man named Adam White? Who is Adam White?" This name was unfamiliar to me. He's a colleague of Peggy's, and she decided to move in with him instead of staying with you. It's puzzling. If her intention was to leave, why not just file for divorce instead of opting for a separation? You're acquainted with Peggy's methods, Rob. She's all about strategizing, having contingency plans, and even preparing for the possibility that those might not work out. It turns out she's been involved with White for almost a year, and the separation seems to have been her way of ensuring she could go back if living with White turned out to be less satisfying than their affair. And everyone seems to be in the know. Yet no one chose to enlighten me. "What excellent friends I possess," I remarked sarcastically. Rising from my seat, I flung my napkin onto the table's center, expressed my thanks with heavy irony, and departed from their residence. On my journey back, I reflected on the revelations I had encountered. There had been no romantic encounters with Peg for more than a year, because she had no desire for intimacy with me, no embraces for the same duration, because she opposed any form of my touch, all while she engaged in an affair. Like someone oblivious, I remained at home, conducting myself with propriety, awaiting the return of someone disloyal, while all my friends, the ones I esteemed so highly, were privy to everything and merely watched as I wasted my time, gazing at empty walls and waiting. But my period of waiting had concluded. The following day, I sought out the services of the Corliss Investigative Agency, providing them with an initial payment. I disclosed. Peggy and White's place of employment to them, requesting a thorough investigation into both individuals. Then I returned home to start organizing what was necessary to sever my ties with Peggy. I intended to wait for the investigative report, but once it was in my possession, I would have my plan of action ready. Having prepared my list, I then considered if there was anything else I needed to do. It had been nearly 16 months since I had been intimate with anyone, with Peg's denial, extending over a year and followed by our separation. I had been a faithfully committed spouse, yet with the knowledge of Peggy's deeds, I had no intention of maintaining celibacy. Seated at the kitchen table, sipping on a beer, I contemplated ending my lengthy period of celibacy, reflecting on Tom's insights regarding Peggy. She was meticulous in planning, having been with her for an extended period. I knew this to be accurate. This suggested she had prepared for various outcomes, including how she anticipated I would react upon discovering her infidelity, and her strategic approach if she decided that life with White was indeed her preference. I envisioned her possibly having someone keep tabs on me, so if I engaged in infidelity, she could leverage it against me in a divorce. Suddenly, my previously drafted list appeared futile, as she likely foresaw such a reaction from me. I had to start over, initiating a new plan. As it materialized, I acknowledged that several tasks required immediate action and could not be delayed. I also realized there were measures I could take that would significantly disturb Peggy. This realization brought a smirk to my face as I wondered if she had prepared for such contingencies. The next day I made a trip to my bank to deposit my paycheck and took the opportunity to inspect the safety deposit box Peggy and I shared. The sign in register showed Peggy's almost weekly inspections of the box. This suggested she was keeping a vigilant eye on my moves, ready to act quickly if she believed I was onto her surveillance. After some contemplation, I removed the 5 deposit certificates from their casings, created duplicates at the bank's copier, and placed the copies back into the original envelopes in the box. Unless Peggy scrutinized them closely, she would be none the wiser to the substitution. Aware that Peg was monitoring my activities, I took my passport from the safe and nonchalantly told a bank worker I was planning a fishing trip to Mexico while returning the safe to its place. As I left the bank, I kept the certificates in my pocket. Normally, I visited the bank twice weekly, during which I intended to cash in a certificate each time, face the early cash-out fee, and then hide the money at my house. I was careful with credit cards, knowing their risk for financial issues. The only cards I owned were an American Express card, which demanded complete payment at bill time, a few gas cards, and a Visa card with a small limit. In contrast, Peg had several credit cards in her name, some with high limits. I knew these limits well because I paid the monthly statements. I noted the current balances and chose to pay just the minimum required to keep them in good standing. Next, I made a list of items I wished for, and in the weeks that followed, indulged in a shopping spree using Peg's credit cards. My goal was to saddle her with a large amount of credit card debt. My acquisitions included a better computer, a Remington 700 rifle from eBay, and a variety of devices, one being a cutting-edge smartphone with every function except the ability to cook. The property was Peg's, a present from her parents, so I had no legal rights to it. Yet we had used it as collateral for a line of credit for our swimming pool and hot tub installation, a loan we had already paid off, leaving the credit line open. I considered using this credit line before she noticed what I was doing. It baffled me that, after deciding on a trial separation, she decided to leave the house to me rather than asking me to move out. By this time, I realized that staying in the house meant I was expected to wait for her return, viewing the separation as temporary. Then I cashed out from my $401,000 at work, accepted the penalty, and secured the cash. Subsequently, I awaited the results from the private detective. The one dilemma I hadn't resolved was how to discreetly start seeing someone new. The possibility that Peg might have someone watching to see if I sought out company was too great a risk. I deduced that my safest strategy would be to leave town on weekends for fishing trips. She knew I enjoyed fishing, a pastime I regularly pursued, and my successful hauls verified my active participation. Thus, I believed she wouldn't employ a detective to follow me, as she had no solid reason to, especially since she considered me gullible, having fooled me for over a year. It was on a Friday, as I was about to leave work, that Tanya called, asking me to stop by their house on my way. I tried to refuse, but she insisted it was essential, so albeit hesitantly I accepted. Upon my arrival, she greeted me and led me to the living room, where Tom sat. He rose, shook my hand, and offered me to relax, while he got a beer for me. "Tanya has something significant to share with you, Rob, and I'm behind her," he said before heading to the kitchen. I looked at Tanya with a puzzled expression, and she indicated I would soon find out, suggesting a beer might be helpful. Tom came back, gave me a Bud Light, said he had errands and would be back late, then departed. With Tom gone, Tanya started. "Rob, you caught a bit of our conversation the night you left suddenly after dinner. Before you say anything, hear me." She stopped me as I began to speak, gesturing for me to listen. "While your reaction was justified, it hurt us. Our only excuse is that we deeply value your friendship and didn't want to upset you. This matter is made more complex by our friendship with Peg. We were hopeful she would recognize her error and come back to you, fully aware of your feelings for her. Yet the uncertainty of your forgiveness made us hold our peace. A reconciliation without this awareness might enable you both to progress without the weight of needing to forgive." She stopped momentarily, concluding their expression of regret, but hinting at more to follow. "Rob, given your character, it's evident to us you would no sooner betray your wife than commit an offense. When did you last share intimacy?" Tanya's sudden inquiry caught me off guard. It was then I took note of her dress, a provocative blouse and a short skirt, paired with high heels that highlighted her physique. Despite our platonic relationship, I couldn't hide my reaction. It then struck me, remembering Tom's "I'm totally supportive" comment, giving me a hint of the direction this was heading. In a subdued voice, I shared with her it had been 18 months. She moved closer, and as I looked down, she whispered, "I want to change that, Rob. Tom's my friend, Tanya. I can't do that to him." As I attempted to stand, she grabbed my arm, persuading me to stay seated. "Tom's okay with it, Rob. He stepped out to give us some room," she clarified. "This isn't out of pity. Tom and I have considered this for months. There's something we lack that you have, so hopefully I can help you. And you can help us." Seeking explanation, I asked for more details. "To put it plainly, Rob, Tom is infertile, and we're hoping you'll assist us in that aspect." Shocked, I looked at her incredulously. When I managed to speak, I said, "You know I couldn't be disloyal to Peg." "True," she conceded, laying her hand softly on my knee, "but that was prior to learning about Peg's deeds. Now informed, you're freed from those obligations to her." "Why choose me?" I asked. "We preferred someone we know rather than an anonymous donor. Plus, we envision you playing a role in the child's life as its godfather, being Uncle Rob." Consistently, the idea seemed far-fetched. "How does this add up, Tanya?" she insisted. "Think about it. If something were to happen to Tom and me, who better to look after the child than you? In the unlikely event the child needs a medical transplant, should we depend on a stranger or wait for a suitable donor? No, Rob, and this has been carefully thought out. We want you to be part of our family." Shifting the topic, she asked, "Are you going to deny being attracted to me?" Initiating physical contact, she affirmed my attraction, pulling me closer. "There are advantages to being the father of my child, Rob. Achieving conception might necessitate numerous attempts over a few weeks, not just during my most fertile periods. I'll keep those times secret. It might extend for weeks. Recall, it's been a significant period for you as well." Her embrace made me reflect on the length of time since I last had an intimate moment, recognizing the reciprocal advantage in our agreement. Proceeding to the bedroom for a genuine attempt at conception dissolved my earlier reservations, especially following her intimate gesture. We undressed, observing each other, then Tanya made herself appealingly available on the bed. "I've understood that passion increases fertility," she stated, encouraging an impassioned engagement. Abandon delicacy, let passion be our guide. Accepting her proposition, the intimacy exceeded any former experience, notably more vigorous than with Peg. Subsequently, Tanya lifted her hips with a pillow, improving the chance for conception. Seeing her in that position, my body responded, becoming erect, and as I joined her once more, I secretly hoped it wouldn't succeed, granting me another opportunity to return and relive the experience. She positioned a pillow under herself as I pulled away, then reiterated the act before I left for my place. Just before she let me out the front door, she kissed me and expressed her thanks for our time together. "I'd like this to be a daily occurrence until I'm pregnant, but Tom typically is intimate 3 or 4 times a week, and although he's willing to accommodate my desires, I refused to give him anything but my utmost. "Could you give me a call tomorrow?" she requested. Throughout my return journey, I reflected on our meeting and realized upon reaching home that if Peg were to find out, she could piece together my frequent visits to Tom and Tanya. She might conclude that even after Tom had left, my stay extended significantly. I shared my worries with Tanya the next day, who calmed me by explaining that nobody would notice Tom's absence because he hadn't actually left. Instead, he had hidden away in his basement workshop until I had gone. This information eased my mind, knowing that being with Tanya while Tom was supposedly away was one thing, but continuing with the knowledge of his actual presence was another. Tanya noticed my reservation and comforted me, asserting, "Don't fret, Rob. Everything will be all right, I guarantee." That evening, Tom called me out for a drink after work, a gathering marked by unease. Picture sitting next to a man, a dear friend for 20 years and the spouse of the woman you're involved with his blessing. He broached the awkwardness immediately, acknowledging how strange it was for us both, yet underlining the necessity of discussing our circumstances. He revisited his consent, which he had given when he allowed Tanya and me time alone. Nevertheless, he admitted Tanya hadn't told me everything. While she had shared her wish for a child and his infertility, she hadn't mentioned his impotence, which had prevented their intimacy for over a year. This shed light on Tanya's urgent passion the night before she was making up for lost time, and her insistence on not placing me in second was to safeguard Tom's dignity, fearing it might lower my opinion of him. Tanya put Tom first, unlike Peg's self-absorption. Tom disclosed Tanya's potent sexual desires and his failure to fulfill them, a situation she found increasingly intolerable. He recognized her eventual infidelity as an unavoidable truth, despite her love for him and attempts to hide it. However, if she found fulfillment elsewhere, the change would be apparent to him. He declared his deep love for her, stating she was his existence, and without her he'd be nothing. The issue was that if Tanya were to betray him in secrecy, the deception would devastate him. I understood the motives behind her actions and could empathize, but the dishonesty was intolerable for me. The only solution, it seemed, was honesty. Yet Tanya wasn't one to blatantly introduce a lover into our home while I distracted myself with TV in the living room. She might have managed a clandestine affair in a hotel with a stranger, but she couldn't move from one man to the next week by week with my awareness. We needed a steady partner, someone both could agree on and feel comfortable with. We thought of several people, but agreement eluded us. Our minds kept going back to you, but we feared the dynamics would shift if Peg returned, forcing us to begin anew. Anyone who knows Adam White knows of his poor reputation, and we expected Peg to see this and come back to you. Assuming you were blind to her potential misdeeds, I must concede she almost had me figured out, as I was clueless until the prolonged separation prompted suspicions of something wrong. With the truth now in the open, knowing Peg is essentially out of the equation, as I'm sure you wouldn't take her back under any conditions, it has liberated Tanya and me to reach out to you. Tanya and I want a child, and she needs a stable sexual partnership until my health issues are addressed. Meanwhile, someone else must step into that role. It might seem strange, but your involvement with my wife is actually saving our marriage. You must grow comfortable with the knowledge that I am aware of and accept this arrangement. I was speechless. The whole situation was so atypical that, although it had already happened, I found it hard to grasp. Tom, after some thought, shared the distress he felt being unable to meet his wife's needs, yet the thought of losing her was far more terrifying. He requested my help, and after hesitating for a moment, I agreed with a nod. On Sunday, we arranged a barbecue for Tom, Tanya, and 3 other pairs of guests. After everyone had left, Tom secluded himself in the den to access my computer, while Tanya and I went up to my room. Taking off my clothes, I found Tanya already lying on the bed, hurrying me along. Within my house and on my own bed, I was determined to proceed in my preferred manner. I lifted her legs onto my shoulders, aiding the gravitational path of my sperm towards her ovum. Soon after, I advised her to use a pillow for support, letting her legs come down afterwards. Tanya looked at me, stating Peg had gone, hinting she thought Peg was either irrational or silly. With my ego flattered, I was driven to prove myself. Thus I moved to lie on top of her in a conventional pose, and despite her protests of "No, Rob, I must go on," I laughed, saying any remaining by the entrance won't just vanish 5 minutes in. Our engagement was fervent. In the subsequent moment, I acknowledged Tom's opinion of Tanya being exceedingly enthusiastic. She led us into a third encounter before I saw her and Tom off in their car. Tom offered a firm handshake, Tanya gave me a kiss on the cheek, and we all agreed the day was a success, hinting at repeating the event soon. To an onlooker, it might seem our conversation revolved around the barbecue. On Monday, I met with John Abbott from the Corliss agency. Handing over the report, he apologized, saying, "Each time I handle one of these, I hope it's just a misunderstanding with nothing amiss. But that doesn't seem to be the situation here. Remember, your fee includes our representation in court, should you choose to sue." I thanked him and left. Driving home, I felt less angry than expected, probably because I had already accepted the truth of the matter. What was I considering doing? Nothing more than what I had determined before. The next step was to discreetly draw from our home equity credit line without Peg noticing until it was too late. I intended to see a lawyer about preparing the documents, but would hold off on sending them until the timing seemed appropriate. Over the following 5 weeks, my meetings with Tom and Tanya, either at their home or mine, were frequent. They let others know I was going through a tough time and were supporting me to lift my mood. My weekly calls with Peg persisted, yet I stopped asking about her condition or the chance of her coming back. Eventually I had enough. I wrote checks from the equity line, and after they cleared, I rented an apartment, left our house, and had Peg served with divorce papers for irreconcilable differences, not adultery. This approach was designed to keep her oblivious to my knowledge of her deeds, in hopes she might think of returning. She'd probably propose a meeting pretending to seek reconciliation. I'd agree, giving myself time for the financial dealings to finalize and to drain our shared accounts. Everything happened as expected, beginning with her accusing me of overreacting and suggesting a lawyer was not needed. I shared my frustration with our indefinite situation, declaring my readiness to move on. I agreed to meet her at Angelo's. It was our first meeting since she left, and she looked good. The sense of missing her was profound indeed. I did miss her, as it was evident my love for her remained. Yet, even if she wished to come back, living together again was out of the question. I chose not to mention this, instead opting to carefully listen as she convincingly argued her point. She talked about her therapy sessions with a psychoanalyst, which helped Peg in understanding herself better. Yada. It was said that Peg was progressing, just needing a little more time. "I understand this is hard for you, sweetheart, but it's just as tough for me. Just give me a little more time, please." I promised to think it over and let her know. After a couple of days, I got in touch with my attorney to begin the subsequent steps. He started the divorce papers and informed Peg about the paused proceedings. At my job, Peg called to thank me, oblivious to my true sentiments, which she was about to find out. That night I had dinner with Tom and Tanya, and after dinner, Tanya and I retreated to her room. As she made herself comfortable, she asked, "Tonight, can we make love instead of just having sex? I want to make love to the father of my child." "Are you sure?" "Yes, the home test on Tuesday and the doctor's confirmation today confirm it. You're going to be a dad." We made love once that night. It was profoundly satisfying. Afterwards, I told her about my impending absence due to finalizing my divorce from Peg and the possibility of moving away. "Don't do anything rash, darling. My child's father needs to be reachable," she advised. "That's Tom, my love. It's time for you to accept that fact, darling. My pregnancy doesn't eliminate my needs for you." Adam White, a member of the Fraternal Order of Eagles and the newly elected Sergeant-at-Arms, never skipped a meeting, leaving Wednesday's meeting feeling uplifted and hopeful for his future advancement within the order. His high spirits remained until a sudden, sharp pain overwhelmed him as he arrived at his condo's parking area, plunging everything into blackness. A neighbor discovered him, quickly calling emergency services, and he was taken to the hospital. The prognosis was severe fractures in every limb and devastating damage to his reproductive system that required surgical removal. Awakening in pain, immobilized in casts and traction, he saw Peg's astonished face before passing out again. I wasn't there when it happened, but I was later informed about the sequence of events when a man asked Peg at the bedside if she was Margaret Olson. After she confirmed, he handed her divorce papers citing adultery. The word adultery clearly disturbed her, particularly as she looked from the papers to Adam's injured form, her face turning pale with shock. She gasped, "Oh my God," and fell into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably. I stayed long enough to be interrogated by the police about my location that night. It turns out I was at a poker game that started an hour before the Eagles meeting and ended an hour after Adam was hospitalized. Peg unwittingly vouched for my alibi, although she didn't know the guys were ready to vouch for me without payment. But the aim was to outsmart Peg, so I used her money to show my appreciation. The Home Shopping Network charged her Visa for the digital cameras given to Bill and Steve. eBay charged her MasterCard for the laptop given to Mike and the 19-inch monitor for Phil. She also paid for the aluminum baseball bat. I had 6 weeks of vacation and 3 weeks of compensatory time coming. I chose to take a 2-month leave, coinciding with that time. After the police decided I wasn't connected to Adam's accident in a way they could prove, I planned a fishing trip to Mexico and left town. Before going, I told my lawyer to put the divorce on hold, letting the process stagnate until Peg pushed it, at which point we'd drop it. We were still married legally, but I cut off all ties with her. I called Tom and Tanya weekly to check in, and they told me Peg had moved back into our house. It seemed like true love wasn't in the cards for Peg and Adam, as she never visited him again after that day by his hospital bed. The arrival of credit card bills maxed out likely tipped her off to the emptied savings and checking accounts, a maxed out credit line and fake CDs in the safe deposit box, driving her desperate search for me. My employer, knowing the whole story, misled her during her inquiries about my whereabouts, suggesting I had left suddenly without saying it outright. Her insistence on a meeting through my lawyer led to her discovery that I had withdrawn the divorce filing, cleared his fees, and he was no longer my legal representative. Left without options, she was forced into declaring bankruptcy several months into my fishing expedition, resulting in the forfeiture of our residence and her Lexus, and her subsequent switch to an older Geo model. Upon learning this news, I came back from Mexico, found an apartment far from Peg, and carefully avoided places where our paths might intersect. Tanya, who was now 5 months into her pregnancy and looking more radiant than before, and I picked up our relationship without the fear of surveillance. We frequently stayed over at each other's homes. 2 months following my return, Peg found out where I was living. One afternoon, as I exited my workplace, I noticed her waiting in the parking lot. I ignored her attempt to approach, got into my car, and left the area. Through the rearview mirror, I saw her hurrying to her car, and I slowed down to let her follow me with ease. My intention was to confront her, but away from the office parking lot. I reduced my speed to ensure she could keep up, and about 10 minutes later, I arrived at the parking lot of Bud's Bar and Grill. By the time she had parked, I was already inside and seated at the bar, ordering a Bud Light just as she came in, spotted me, and made her way over. She was vocally expressing her frustration as she approached. "You can't hide from me, you scoundrel. I know Peg, and so I was prepared for her actions." Quickly turning on the stool, I caught her wrist as she tried to strike my head. Holding on as firmly as possible, she grimaced in discomfort as I stated, "I have every right to be angry at you, Peg. So it's best you don't agitate me further. Keep your hands to yourself unless you're prepared for significant pain." I let go of her wrist and made it clear I wasn't fleeing from you. I intentionally drove slowly so you could follow me here. I chose not to reveal your secrets in the company parking lot. It doesn't matter here since everyone knows you're disreputable. I have no interest in talking to you. I'm tired of your lies. I want my money back. What money, Peg? You owe me for the money you took out against our house and for everything else we own together, which I want returned. You won't get it back, Peg. My view is that it acts as compensation for your behavior towards me. What do they call it? Damages for emotional distress and loss of marital privileges. I believe what I've taken nearly makes up for the pain and embarrassment I went through, missing out on intimacy for a year and a half while you were being unfaithful, and the humiliation of being viewed as a fool by everyone. Curse you, Rob. I lost my family's home because of you. So what, Peg? It clearly didn't matter much to you, considering you moved in with another man. I mean it, Rob. I need that money. Here's the news for you, Peggy. You won't receive a dime from me. You tried to swindle me, and now you're dealing with the consequences. Accept it. We'll see what the court decides. It doesn't matter what they decide, Peg. This is how it will play out. You'll have to get a lawyer and file for divorce to take me to court so they can order the division of assets. As soon as you file, I'll respond with a counterfile. A skilled lawyer can stall the case for 6 to 8 months, during which you'll be paying your attorney. Can you afford to pay him for nothing? I have all the proof needed to dispute your claims in court, and if I win, you'll end up worse off. The worst scenario for me is a court mandate to split assets. I'll oblige, leave the courtroom, and you and your lawyer will be left waiting for payment indefinitely. You'll reach out to me, but I'll disregard your calls. Then your lawyer, still charging you, will obtain a court order specifying a deadline for payment. You and your attorney will wait, but the deadline will come and go without you seeing any money. Your lawyer, while still accumulating charges, secures a legal victory over me. I'm without bank accounts to seize my vehicle is rented, and my living situation is in a rented, furnished space, leaving you devoid of assets to take. Your sole option becomes wage seizure, yet the instant my earnings are seized, I plan to leave my employment. What do we have then, Peg? A year of legal bills on your end for maybe $200 from a single pay period. The remaining path for you is to approach the judge to issue a warning about potential jail time for contempt if I ignore his orders. What you'll end up with, Peg, is merely a postcard from a charming fishing town in Mexico where I'll reside until my funds run out, which, thanks to you, will be a while. Peg, your attempts backfired, you were outsmarted, and I've balanced the scales. You should feel fortunate. Think back on the events with your partner and consider yourself incredibly fortunate. He's been stripped of his power and is now incapable of betraying another's spouse. Yet you remain at liberty to choose your companions. I had doubts about your role in Adam's ordeal. What you think you know versus what is provable are worlds apart. Incidentally, how is your love life? I've heard you haven't seen the poor man since he was first admitted to the hospital. It's futile now you've robbed him of his most important quality. That's severe, Peg, even by your standards. But it's the truth. He was notably gifted and a remarkable lover, but in time I would have tired of him and gone back. Oh, Peg, had I only known so much. Stress could have been avoided if I had realized you would come back. Ah, it appears my decision spoiled everything. This regret is mine to bear indefinitely. Imagine the life we might have had we simply communicated better. You can be so insensitive. Yes, Peg, and you're unfaithful. I finished my beverage, stood, wished her a dismal existence, and exited the tavern. Divorce papers, citing insurmountable differences, were delivered to me 3 days later. I didn't contest them, and she received half of our shared assets, and I was tasked with repaying the borrowed funds from our credit line. I left her to try and collect anything and tossed away the final ruling. She apparently took my caution to heart, as I never heard from her again. This mess resulted in an intriguing conclusion. It was commonly agreed that I might have been insensitive, but even such people can have friends. One was Peggy's boss. He condemned her actions towards me post my unfortunate events and dismissed her. Officially, it was attributed to financial cutbacks and downsizing, but it was evident she was let go. Unable to secure work nearby, she relocated to California, where she had relatives. Since then, she has remained out of touch, even with her sister. This episode closed on a sorrowful note, but also signaled a wonderful new start. Tanya welcomed a beautiful baby girl into the world, and Tom was utterly enchanted, lavishing her with affection. Uncle Rob made regular visits, dedicating endless hours to play with little Martha. Tom kept the full story of his impotence from Tanya and me. He hid his cancer diagnosis found too late, which had advanced. After his passing, Tanya presented me with a letter addressed to me, marked for Rob's eyes, only she claimed to have not peeked as it was intended for me. The letter disclosed Tom's wish for me to support their family in his absence, entrusting their care to me. Tanya cried as I read the letter, and I offered her consolation. Once she was calm, she asked about my intentions. I decided to fulfill Tom's expectation to look after my girls. Tanya and I married 6 months afterward. Dear audience, I welcome your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.